So I can actually focus it, but then as soon as I press record, it unfocuses again. I don't know. So in more Miss Gowland is hilariously incapable of looking after paperwork, I was like, oh my god, there are these weird pink dots on this poem. I have since worked out that it's due to the pink highlighter that I used on Cafe Royale, which has completely gone through the page. So, sorry about that. Yeah, I you know, it happens. If you have a lovely, neat and tidy poetry book, then cool. How did you achieve that? Please let me know, because I don't have those skills. Today we're going to talk about Never Go Back. I love Never Go Back. It is one of my personal favourites from the collection. It's super weird and kind of creepy and fantastic. So we'll start by reading it and then we'll move on to actually annotating it. In the bar where the living dead drink all day and a jukebox reminisces like a crack... Blah, 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 blah. Blah, blah, blah. Should try again. In the bar where the living dead drink all day and a jukebox reminisces in a cracked voice, there is nothing to say. You talk for hours in agreed motifs, anecdotes shuffled and dealt from a well-thumbed pack, snapshots. The smoky mirrors flatter. Your ghost buys a round for the parched old faces of the past. Never return to the place where you left time pining till it died. Outside, the streets tear litter in their thin hands. A tired wind whistles through the blackened stumps of houses at a limping dog. God, this is an awful place, says the friend, the alcoholic, whose head is a negative of itself. You listen and nod, bereaved. Baby, what you owe this place is unpayable in the only currency you have. So drink up, shut up, then get them in again, and never go back. The house where you were one of the brides has cancer. It prefers to be left alone, nursing its growth and cracks, each groan and creak, accusing you as you climb the stairs to the bedroom and draw your loved body on blurred air with the simple power of loss. All the lies told here, and all the cries of love suddenly swarm in the room, sting you, disappear. You shouldn't be here. You follow your shadow through the house, discover that objects held in the hands can fill a room with pain. You lived here only to stand here now and half believe that you did. A small moment of death by a window myopic with rain. You learn this lesson hard, speechless, slamming the front door, shaking plaster confetti from your hair. A taxi implying a hearse takes you slowly the long way round to the station. The driver looks like death. The places you knew have changed their names by neon, cheap tricks in a theme park with no theme. Sly sums of money wink at you in the cab. At a red light, you wipe a slick of cold sweat from the glass for a drenched whore to stare you full in the face. You pay to get out, past the welcome to sign on the way to the barrier, an emigrant for the last time. The train sighs and pulls you away, rewinding the city like a film, snapping it off at the river. You go for a drink, released by a journey into nowhere, no when, and all the way home you forget. Forget. Already, the fires and lights come on, wherever you live. Okay, so, let's talk about Never Go Back. The basic premise of Never Go Back is that you can never go back. So, the idea is, you can't go back. Yeah, you can still see that. To, to the past. Because the people and places have changed. So overall, it's just better not to try. Now, what's interesting with Never Go Back is that it's an imperative. It's telling you not to go back. It's telling you not to try to go back. And then if you compare Never Go Back to something like Pluto or Beachcomber, where they're, or nostalgia, where they're trying to go back and they can't get back to where they wanted to be, is this idea that just don't go back, go forwards. Now, what I love about this poem especially is you can see there's this kind of weird structural thing going on. Let's grab a pen. I don't know if you noticed these asterisks. Let's stick a little label on it and call it an asterisk so you know how to spell that. Now everyone thinks it's asterix, but it's not, it's asterisk. Like, oh, that was a risky poetic choice, Carol Ann Duffy. But can you see how it splits the poem into 3 chunks of 2 stanzas each? So you have 2 stanzas here, and that's like chunk 1. 2 stanzas here, and that's chunk 2. And 2 stanzas here, and that's chunk 3. So it's got these 3 chunks. Now, with my year 13s, not last year, not the year before that, we kind of came up with the conclusion that this first one, why are all of my pens run out? Really? Okay, let's try this one. There we go. We kind of come up with the conclusion that it was like youth for the first section, maybe like illness or decline for the second section, and then death for the last section. It's not strict, but it's this idea that maybe that's the kind of slight structure that's got going on with it. So if we maybe start at the beginning, start at the top. In the bar where the living dead drink all day. Well, first of all, living dead is oxymoronic, right? It's 2 things that can't be true at the same time. You can't be both living and dead. You're not a character in Buffy. So what's going on? Well, it's this idea maybe of people who've given up hope or given up life, or they're not pursuing anything. And the living dead drink all day. Can you see how you got that duh, alliteration there going on? Duh, duh, duh. And a jukebox reminisces in a cracked voice, there is nothing to say. So it's this idea, the cracked voice is decay, right? Something's damaged, broken down. But it's also this idea of music as memory. So absolutely compare that to something like Before You Were Mine, or Prayer even, but also think about something like Reference Back. Now, I personally think that Reference Back and Never Go Back go together really well. Reference Back is not from the Duffy, it's from the Larkin. So there is nothing to say. You talk for hours. Can you see how you've got the caesura there? It's like they're cut off. And there's this constant contrast and tension coming in here. And there's a tension in that contrast, because how can you talk for hours if there's nothing to say? Now let's grab a pen. Okay, let's quickly look. I'll tell you what, actually, let's grab a pen that will work, because that one's not going to do it. If you look quickly at the way that language is done here, you've got the voice of the thing, you've got nothing to say here, you talk for hours, and then you've got here agreed motifs, anecdotes coming through there. So this idea of like the language coming through and being almost like cards. So you've got the second person here, you do it. So that's including the reader. And then you have this tension consistently coming through from these contrasts, these oxymoronic points. And the idea of if an agreed motif or an anecdote that's repeated, that's repetition or memory, a little repeated story. Because our understanding of repetition is inherently reliant on our memory. It's the idea that you only know that I repeated something because I said it before. So it's the idea that you only know that I repeated something because I said it before. Don't worry, the video's not broken, I was just messing with you. Okay, so you have that kind of idea that it's in some way stale again. If you think of Moments of Grace, it's that idea that the language has become stale, and can you see how using that language of cards again, shuffled and dealt from a well-thumbed pack, it seems like it's going to be about cards. Remember, Carol Ann Duffy is a poker player. But then it says here snapshots, so it's the photographs, which are a version of memory, right, that you could try to use to try to go back. So then think about something like The Good Teachers, or something like Beachcomber, where there's a photographic element of trying to get back to somewhere. The smoky mirrors flatter. Okay, well, this is to do with the idea of memory again. So let's grab this flavour highlighter, and we'll say that this one's memory. Smoky mirrors flatter. It's the idea that memory is imperfect, right? If you remember something that you did, you'll always paint yourself in a good light, so it'll be flattering to you, but it's the smoky mirror of memory. Obviously also that smoky mirror, the bar, the jukebox, these link together to give you the imagery of the bar. So these are like settings. So let's just, so you got the bar, you got drink all day, you've got the jukebox, you've got the shuffled and dealt with the cards, you've got visor round, smoky mirrors. So there's that kind of, that setting of the bar element going on there, the youthful, maybe place where you shouldn't be, but you know. So yeah, you've got the idea of like imperfect memory paints you in a good light. Perfect. Because you don't ever actually remember anything perfectly, you remember your impression of it. You've got this imagery of like death coming through there as well. So you've got the living dead, drink all day, the idea of something being cracked, the idea of a ghost, the old faces of the past, parched, time pining till it died is the idea of like death, loss coming through there. And we're in stanza 1. Okay. Where you left time pining till it died, obviously you've got this idea of time and memory coming through there. So it's this, let's put this here, look. And you've got never return, because that's obviously never go back, never return. The space where you left time pining till it died, remember like Pluto, the idea of space and time going together. And obviously memory going on there. Now I would link this to the poem Meantime, maybe the poem Disgrace, which is one of my other personal favourites, because, you know, it tells the story of a disgusting house, and you've seen my classroom desk, I feel that on a personal level. So, outside the streets tear litter in their thin hands, a tired wind whistles through the blackened stumps of houses at a limping dog. First of all, you've got that language of bad things, right? We've got tear litter, thin hands, tired, blackened, limping, everything's damaged, everything's broken, everything's, it's got that same idea as earlier, that everything's kind of breaking down. But also you just have this personification, the streets and the wind. It links to the idea of the faces of the past. This idea that you're almost being haunted like a ghost, because there's a personified presence there that isn't right. So that, that feels uncomfortable. So what will we write here? We'll write repeated personification. Suggests haunted, and then I'm just going to put a little arrow here, ghost, old faces of the past, to show that's how that links up together. God, this is an awful place. says the friend, the alcoholic, whose head is a negative of itself. Okay, so an appeal to God, who is not there, who doesn't respond, and it's, not expected. It is an awful place, that's true. We're kind of there. We've seen the tired, the limping, the blackened, the thin. We're like, yeah, that's bad. But the friend is the alcoholic, whose head is a negative of itself. So you've got this idea maybe of like memory coming through there, but this one's awkward because, okay, is it just that their hair is white now because of old age? So they appear like they're in negative, like if they had dark hair before, now they've got white hair. Or is it that they have a negative mental state, so their head is negative to itself? And in fairness, that would be backed up by what they say there. This is an awful place, and they're an alcoholic. That would link up. Or is it the idea of like a photo negative, which would link to the previous stanza with the snapshots? So you're going to have to work out which one of these things you think it goes together with, how it would work for you. It might be all of them, it might be none. Now, obviously you have this imagery of death kind of running throughout. So where did we get that death colour before? Bereaved. I'll put alcoholic as well. It's this idea that there's this idea of death running throughout. And if you think about it, that kind of makes sense. Because in literature, whenever we're talking about something, we also have to consider its opposite. And when we think about life, we inevitably have to think about death as well. So then there's a direct kind of address here. Baby, what you owe this place is unpayable in the only currency you have. Obviously this is ironic because we were literally just talking about age. But it's almost diminishing the person that they're speaking to. And the idea of owing a place something being unpayable in the currency you have, is you can't give back to the people who made you or to the places that made you. But also, I would definitely link it to nostalgia. Do you remember strange coins? Strange coins? That's a good quotation to link together there. Drink up, shut up, and then get them in again, and never go back. So can you see how there's this irony here, because you've got the idea of going back to something, doing something again, but then never going back. You can't, if you're doing something again, you are, ooh, it's just attached, there we go. If you're doing something again, you're going back to it. So again, you've got that kind of irony in it. And also this again, which is epizeuxis, because it's repetition with no other words in between. It links to that idea of the well-thumbed pack, the idea of going over something again and again and again and again and again. It's this idea of memory starting to pull through there. So then we move on to the next section, the kind of illness section, I guess. The house where you were one of the brides has cancer. Well, again, you've got this personification of the place. So the house has cancer. Well, hang on a second. How can a house have cancer? A house is just a house. Houses don't have cancer. That's very silly. But it's this idea of like personification of place to set up the feeling of it. It adds to the mood of the poem. And you have this idea, the imagery of a bride as well. It's this imagery of like white or hope, because that's what brides are about. Any second now that time is going to go off again. I'm so sorry. It's very annoying. I wish I could do something about it. So, it prefers to be left alone, nursing its growth and cracks. So you've got, look, nursing, oh, that's just pen just escaping. Nursing its growth and cracks, each groan and creak, accusing you as you climb the stairs to the bedroom and draw your love body on Blair air with a simple power of loss. All the lies told her, all the cries of love suddenly swarm into the room, sting you, disappear. Okay, we got some things to talk about right now. So, nursing its growth and cracks, each groan and creak. Can you see? Oh, it's unfocused. There we go. Can you see how that's done the sound there? Grut, crut, grut, crut. It's alliterative. It's not perfect alliteration, but it is alliterative, and it kind of highlights this. If you imagine walking on like creaky floorboards, it would go kind of grr, 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 grr. It's the sound of the footsteps on the floorboard. I guess maybe you could say it's almost like onomatopoeia, because it sounds like groans and creaks as well. So onomatopoeia, onomatopoeia. And it's this idea that it's accusatory, as though the person in it feels guilty. The whole setting of the house is unwelcoming. And it's unclear whether that unwelcoming idea is based on Carol Ann Duffy's personal experience or not. Okie dokie. So you have this idea of like being rejected or unwelcome in the house. All the lies told here and all the cries of love suddenly swarm into the room, sting you, disappear. Can you see how the rhyme pulls that together? Because you've got all the lies, all the cries, which sort of suggests that the cries of love were lies. It's linked through the sound to suggest maybe the idea that the cries of love were fake or false or whatever. And it's almost like insects. They swarm into the room and sting you and disappear. Now at first you might be like, hang on a second, I thought we were talking about illness, but you talk about a plague of insects or a plague of locusts, so it's this idea that it's like a plague or a punishment. The idea that you're being stung by these ideas that happened to you. Now these are just memories again, so it's this idea of the memories coming through there. It's a memory that's dragging you back in. And obviously you have the cancer, the growths, the cracks, whatever, that link into this like imagery of death. You shouldn't be here. You follow your shadow through the house. Discover that objects held in the hands can fill a room with pain. Okay, so there's straight away a caesura here that I think we need to talk about. Now every time we see a caesura, every single time, we have to go, okay, a caesura is a breaking or a cutting up the line. So why is it breaking or cutting? When we look at the rest of it, what does it make sense? Now, I think that it could be just representing the breaking of the house, or maybe it could represent being cut off from the house, from the memory. It's, up to interpretation. It's a poem. They're always up to interpretation. But it's this idea that whenever you see caesura, you need to be looking for how is it cut off? How is it broken? What's happened there that caused something to be separated from something else? Why is it pulled apart? Why is it broken? Now you follow your shadow. Well, hang on a second. Your shadow should be following you. So there's this inversion. But also, obviously, a shadow can be a ghost. There's another word for a ghost as well. So it's the idea that everything's backwards or upside down, or maybe it's a bit haunted again. Objects held in the hands can fill a room with pain. The idea of the pain of memory. And then you have that kind of pulled up here. So you've got this idea of the pain of memory, and then you lived here only to stand here now and half believe that you did. So this idea of memory not quite feeling real, there's an unreality to memory. And the objects held in the hands is the idea of the pain. Well, what pain have we talked about? Most specifically, nostalgia. So if you think about picking up like a photograph of someone or a teddy bear of someone's or something like that, it might fill the room with emotional pain. A small moment of death by a window myopic with rain. Okay, so let's talk about a small moment of death by a window myopic with rain. See, that's because it rhymes and I got muddled. It's pathetic fallacy, but it's really called pathetic fallacy. That's way more cool than any pathetic fallacy we saw in Jane Eyre. Okay, and the reason why is the window's myopic, so it's blinded, its eyesight is damaged, it's blurred, it is doing the same job as the smoky mirrors. Let's do a little arrow. So it's this idea that its memory is blurred, right? You can't see things properly through the window. You can't see your own memories clearly. They are changed or damaged or made different. And a small moment of death can be this idea of loss again, the idea that something's been gone, it's been lost, it's been taken out of the memory, it's been changed. It could be the memory of death, so you've got like death, you've got the memory of death. Also a small moment of death, the French call orgasm the little death, le petit mort. So it's the idea that you also might have this as like a romantic image. Now this doesn't make super loads of sense now, but when we come to read some of the other poems, particularly the lover poems, in there it will make sense. Okay, so if you think about it as, I'm going to put orgasm because I don't have loads of space to write in there. It makes more sense then. We haven't read anything like, we haven't read Adultery, we haven't read Steam, but when we read them, you'll be like, oh, okay, I see what you were talking about there. You learn this lesson hard, speechless, slamming the front door, shaking plaster confetti from your hair. So you have the idea of like a painful mistake to learn, the idea of like not being able to go back to a memory, it not being okay to go back. But you also have this idea of speechless. So can you see how we went from talk for hours, nothing to say, to you're speechless? You've lost the speech that you had earlier. You don't have that anymore. And then also you have the plaster confetti from your hair. Well, partly the house is sick, so the house is damaged, but also it links back to the image of the bride from earlier. Can you see how the bride is now just a damaged part of the house? It's not really real. Obviously the idea of the bride, the image of the bride being damaged, might link into Carol Ann Duffy's sexuality if you think about the attitudes to sexuality, but also marriage wasn't legalised, equal marriage wasn't legalised until 2013, so she couldn't have been one of the brides as well. It's this idea that it's kind of damaged a perception of what could have been. But that brings us into the last section. Woohoo, guys! We are 2/3 of the way through. A taxi implying a hearse takes you slowly the long way round to the station. So, I mean, taxi is a black vehicle, but implying a hearse because it's the idea of a funeral, right? You're dead. Funeral. The you of the poem is dead. Takes you slowly the long way round to the station. Well, going slowly the long way round is like life, isn't it? Okay. We are all constantly at every moment dying. That's what being alive is. It's a slow, inevitable creep towards death. But the idea is that you go the long way round. So you're going to the station, but you go the long way round. You go the scenic route. You see what you can see on the way, what you can find out on the way. You drop your pens on the floor. All of these things are important factors in life. The driver looks like death. Again, it's that kind of cutesy thing where it's like, oh, it's, you know, the driver doesn't look very good. But also the driver looks like death if you think about the idea of death picking you up for the station. The idea of death, Grim Reaper, picking you up and taking you. The places you knew have changed their names by neon. Cheap tricks in a theme park with no theme. So, you have the idea of language going through. The places you knew have changed their names. So obviously names is how we identify things. But also the places you knew have changed their names because they're different. Now they're not the same thing anymore. It's nostalgia, right? You can't go back. Things have changed. You can't re-access a memory. Do you remember in nostalgia? The same bell, the same whatever, and everything changed. It was the last couple of lines. Obviously not with the whatevers in there, but I can't remember the quotation. And that's what you're going for there. Now you also then have that sort of garish and grotesque thing coming through. Cheap tricks in a theme park with no theme. Well, that's pointing out, it's garish and grotesque, but it's pointing out the garishness and grotesqueries of life. So just like your life is the long way round to the station, your life is a theme park with no theme. There's a lot of stuff going on in it and it seems busy, but it's not, you know, there's no theme to it, there's no organisation to it, there's a lack of order. Sly sums of money wink at you in the cab. Again, can you see how sly and wink, their personification there? And again, I think that kind of gives this idea of like ghostliness as well coming through there. It's literally just, you know when you go in a taxi and they have the meter running? It's just the meter running in the taxi, but it seems like it's kind of ticking up or ticking away. It's literally just the taxi meter. At a red light, you wipe a slick of cold sweat from the glass for a drenched whore to say you full in the face. Okay, so again, we've got the glass. Okay, we talked a little bit about the concept of like a rational glass in Jane Eyre, but can you see how we had the mirrors here in the first section, the window here in the second section, and another wet window here in the third section. So this idea of memory or remembering coming through here. But wiping the slick of cold sweat, super gross, setting up the idea of the setting, but also the idea of like fear. A red light is, you know, stop, don't. And then for a drenched whore to stare you full in the face. Now, if you look out of a window, then it's the idea of someone else looking at you, and it's just setting, right? It's like, oh my god, it's raining, there are people outside, they're whores, they're not very nice people. But if you look at night in a car window, you don't normally see out of the window, you normally see your own reflection. Particularly since it's staring you full in the face. It's the idea that the reflection of herself is accusatory. Accusatory. And there's a sense of alienation because she doesn't own that that's her. And we've seen that kind of alienation before. If you remember Small Female Skull, that separation between herself and herself. Or Beachcomber, there's a separation between herself now and herself in the past. You've got this idea then of escape. You pay to get out, so escape. Past the welcome to sign. Well, that's ironic because you're escaping, you're getting out. On the way to the barrier, so there's something that stops you, or a barrier. An emigrant for the last time. Now, okay, immigrant with IMM means someone coming in, right? Because im means in. Emigrant means someone going out because E means get out, like exit, right? If you think of it like if you exit something, if there is an egress of people, they've left. if you eject someone from your building, you kick them out. But if you inject something into your body, you put it in. Okay? So this is the idea of escaping, getting out. For the last time, right? It's for the last time because you can never go back. I mean, it might be because you're dead, but you can never go back to a memory. It's gone, it's past. The train sighs and pulls you away, rewinding the city like a film, snapping it off at the river. Okay, so rewinding the city like a film, it kind of pulls back to that idea of the well-thumbed pack, the snapshots from earlier. It's memory, right? So let's rewinding the city like a film, snapping it off at the river. So obviously it's just memory. Now on a literal level, it's just seeing the city pass you as you leave on the train. But you have that idea of memory as like a film. I would think about also the idea of trains and journeys and escape. So Dockery and Son would be a good one. Whitsun Weddings. It's this idea of using a train as a metaphor for a journey, but not a physical journey, a metaphorical one. And so you have this idea of released by a journey. It's this idea of escape kind of coming through. So we had escape up here, we've got escape down here, getting out. Released by a journey into nowhere, no when, and all the way home you forget. So it's this idea of losing memory, right? You've lost it. Can you see how it's snapped off by the caesura? It's broken off as well. So you've got that. There we go. They go together. So you've got the caesura. It's broken off, snapped off like the film, and it's the idea of like loss. Let's move this up a bit. Loss of memory. Now, here's the thing. If you forget, if you're released by a journey into nowhere, no when, are you dead? No one knows. You could just be forgetting your memories. That could be it. And that makes this final line kind of ambiguous and very different to the previous lines. Already the fires and lights come on wherever you live. So either it's that memory is bad, but living in the present moment is good. So the present is like a home. Or, I don't know, maybe like consciousness is welcoming. Consciousness. Or maybe it's heaven. If you read that as a life. So that was Never Go Back. I've made a right mess of that poem, haven't I? Okay. Have a good time annotating, and I look forward to seeing you next lesson.